Hello, MYOG. This is Phil, and I'm going to show you real quick how to do a flat felt seam on synthetic fabrics that you can't iron, like XPac. There have been some questions lately about how to do a flat felt versus a French seam and kind of which one's easier and harder. And some of the comments suggested that not being able to iron makes it difficult. And I just want to show you what I do to get around that. And of course, the reason you don't want to iron this stuff is because nylon synthetics melt at a really low temperature, and when you hit them with an iron, even if you're super careful, it's easy to damage them. And even if you iron them at a temperature where you don't appear to damage them, I'm still not sure what all that does to the coatings, and so I just really prefer to avoid ironing. So what I'm going to do is join these two pieces of scrap XPac here. I'm going to sew this in just because this also helps illustrate an important point about how to orient your materials. And so the first thing I'm going to do is baste this little bit of XPac on here just so it sits tight. You'll note that I'm using a compound feed machine. You don't need to use this. A regular domestic machine would do just fine with layers of XPac and nylon webbing. So basically, we've got our nylon now attached to this. I'm going to be overlapping just like this. Some folks suggest sewing a flat felt seam like this because that makes it easier when you get to the folding the seam allowance over part if it's already trimmed. I find it's more difficult to kind of line things up, and when I'm moving quick, I prefer just to line up my pieces exactly. I have a 5/8 inch seam allowance marked out on my machine. I use 5/8 because that's how I design my patterns, and it gives me plenty of seam allowance to do a quick flat felt seam. So right now I'm just joining these two pieces right on 5/8 inches. And we're almost done. So now we've got these joined at 5/8. You'll see we've got a piece of grow grain in here. Let's say that this is the top of the pack. The orange material is going to be up the top. In other words, I want this facing this direction. Make sure that you lay it the direction that you want it to face in, because what that means is that you're going to have your seam allowance like this on the back. This piece that's visible is going to get folded underneath on the inside here, and it means that we need to trim this one. You don't need to be super scientific about it. I trim it to just under half. So at 5/8, half would be 5/16. I trim it to probably closer to 1/4 of an inch. And I do also go ahead and trim. I'm going behind the webbing right now. I trim the webbing out as well so that I end up with a nice flat and smooth piece of fabric that I can fold here. And so this webbing has been trimmed right here. I clipped it, but I do need to get behind and get the stitches out so that, and that doesn't matter because this is all in the seam allowance anyhow. So this is out now. This is typically the point where you would fold over like this and iron, but we're not going to iron. We're going to use this basting tape. This is a 1/4 inch basting tape. I buy it on Amazon. It's a generic brand name from, it comes from China. I'm not sure what the name is on it, but they do make a washable basting tape, which doesn't stick quite as well, but it's great if you're going to be using it in clothing. And then they make this kind of basting tape. This is not washable. This stuff is super sticky, and it does a great job sticking to the back of our XPacs, even though they've sometimes got waterproof treatment on them that isn't very sticky. So I like to use this stuff. You peel it and expose it. And then what you're going to do is you're going to fold your material down just so the stitches are showing. You don't want to cover up the stitches. And you want to press it down so it stays put. And once you have it pressed down, you can open it, give it a nice fold, and now what you see is that we're going to have the XPac facing up towards the orange, which is the top, or the webbing's facing up towards the top of the pack. On the back side, you're gonna have this seam here. All the raw edges are hidden from this side. Under here, you've got the raw edge that's taped down. So this is the way it's gonna get folded. We are going to get ready to sew now our top stitch. I am setting my presser foot, so it's about a little over 1/8 of an inch. I'm just setting it so it's even with this toe on the presser foot here is lined up right on the seam between the orange and the red material. And I just sew a straight line down that. This is a good opportunity to bar tack or back tack a little bit on your webbing where it goes through to make sure you have a nice strong connection there. And then keep pushing through to the end. And we end up with a beautiful seam. It's super strong. Right here, you can see this. We've got a little bit of extra reinforcement right here. If you did want to run a bar tacker machine, if you have a bar tacker, or if you're going to do a bar tack, after you're done doing this, you can go ahead and bar tack right across this. And it's really best if you can get that whole bar tack to be situated within this folded over seam area, because what you've got here is 3 layers of material plus a layer of webbing. And when you put stitching through this, it just gets really strong. So I'm going to zoom back out. That's how I do this. And again, it's not very time consuming at all. You can set your seam allowances to whatever you want, and you can top stitch however far you want. You just want to make sure your top stitching does go through the back. I've still got quite a bit of room here if I wanted to go further out, or even if I wanted to do a second row of stitching, which I don't really generally find a use for, but it's an option. That's all. I hope this was helpful.